set, hut, hut.
As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sound of Golden Blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50 to 10 to 5. A touchdown West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Tay Von Austin.
But Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth.
It's Mountaineer pride.
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
We've no doubt tonight they shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season.
And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads webcast. August 1st edition. Fall camp is underway, and there are some jobs that may be up for grabs, some position battles we're going to need to discuss here as we get into fall camp. These will be decided, in the next couple of weeks, most of these. So we're going to talk about all of those here throughout this stream, and I'll kind of give my thoughts on each one of those. And for sure, as always is the case throughout these live streams, encourage you guys share your thoughts in the comments there. Any questions you got for fall camp, I'll try to get to as many of your questions as I can throughout the stream as well. But definitely want to get into talking about some of these position battles for sure. But really appreciate you guys tuning in here live if you are in here live. Hey, Orlando, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here on this channel. Orlando's a big fan of my other channel there, JC's Pop Culture, where I talk movies and especially the EA Sports College Football 25 video game. We both share a love for the EA Sports video game. So good to see you popping in here. Listening to me talk some WVU tonight, Orlando. Appreciate that, man. But anyone else that's in here, you got any questions for WVU's fall camp? Any thoughts on these position battles? Throw it in there. I'll try and get to some of your all's comments as well. But with no further ado, let's go ahead. Let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about some of these position battles here. We pull up the roster here. And let's start with the receivers. Obviously, these are the scholarship receivers that West Virginia has on the roster currently, not including the walk-ons. Of course, you guys know my roster tracker only keep track with the 85 scholarship players. So we're looking at these names right here competing really for, three spots essentially, the two outside receivers and the man in the slot there. And you have a slew of guys that could really earn these starting jobs. Last year after we got rid of, I guess you could say, or they moved on anyway. Jeremiah Aaron and Cortez Braham didn't have the career that they wanted. Of course, Devin Carter since moved on as well. Last year, we saw a lot of Preston Fox. Hudson Clement really emerged as a huge threat, and Traylon Ray is a receiver with a ton of potential, as well as Rodney Gallagher, who was a very high-rated recruit, still learning the position last year. This year seems like he really will come into his own. Last year was involved in doing a lot of gadget plays, whether it was jet sweeps or reverses, screens, that type of thing. This year, expecting him to get more involved in the downfield passing game. So those are kind of the names that we know. Jarrell Williams also has been here a while, been a reserve player that could factor in. But, who's been added to that group? Of course, Jaden Bray, the transfer from Oklahoma State. Channel members at the Almost Heaven level know I've been working on the rewatch of the 2023 season, and just not too long ago did the Oklahoma State rewatch and got to see Jaden Bray make a few grabs in that game back when he was playing for Oklahoma State. He even caught a touchdown for the Cowboys against the Mountaineers last year, and he's a receiver with a bunch of potential. And then more recently, another addition is Justin Robinson, J-Rob, as I've heard Garrett Green refer to him as today in his interview, which was a great interview. Check that out if you haven't already. But Justin Robinson, really highly regarded receiver, one of the top receiver recruits in the country coming out of high school, went to Georgia, even got on the field some early in his career at Georgia before transferring to Mississippi State, where he played, solidly during his time there, including a big game in their bowl game a couple of years ago. And I think he's a receiver that can make a difference. Great size on the outside, great speed. So just from those names that I mentioned, that's a lot of guys battling for those few spots there. And then, of course, you still have the other guys that you can factor in, the freshmen, Brandon Raymond, Day Farmer, and Dom Collins. And, of course, another redshirt freshman and TJ Johnson, who they kind of thought they were going to recruit as a tight end, but has since transitioned over and is going to be in that wide receiver room as well. So a lot of talent, a lot of potential in this room. And if we pull up the university's preseason depth chart, we can kind of see what the early thoughts are on this. I'll go ahead and do that now. And if we look here at the receiver position, we got the Z receiver, the X receiver, which are your two outside receivers, and the H receiver, which will be your slot receiver. And you can see right now at the X and at the Z, they have the or in between the names, so really no solidified starter in the preseason depth chart, even on those. At the Z receiver on one side, you got Preston Fox or Traylon Ray. At the X receiver on the other side, you got Hudson Clement or Jaden Bray, both those guys battling. And then in the slot, they do have Rodney Gallagher currently listed as the first teamer, with true freshman Day Farmer making an appearance on the preseason depth chart. Shows how highly they regard him. High-rated 4-star recruit that West Virginia was able to flip and get the commitment from after he had previously committed to UCF. So all of those guys on there. I think the biggest surprise for me on this depth chart was the absence of Justin Robinson not showing up here on the preseason depth chart. I know a lot of people were speculating maybe it's just because his signing wasn't announced until later, didn't become official until later. But the only thing about that gives me pause is his signing was announced at the same time of Kakora Tarnu, who's listed at cat safety, and Dantes Fagan were all announced at the same time as him. So it's weird that they're on the depth chart, but he didn't make an appearance there. Almost makes you wonder if they're trying to keep that close to the vest. I mean, you sure know that Penn State knows that they have him, but maybe if they're looking at the depth chart, they don't see him. Maybe it's something they can hope slips Penn State's mind, because Justin Robinson is certainly someone that I think is going to factor in at one of these two outside spots. And if he does that mean that Preston Fox or Traylon Ray maybe moves to the inside? We know that that's something that they've done in the past. Their real goal is to get, their best 11 on the field. And if they feel like that, 3 of their best receivers are guys that are listed as outside receivers now, they'll have no problem shifting them to play in the slot instead. We've seen them do this in the past. A few years ago, Sam James began his career as an outside receiver before becoming a slot receiver. And even last year, we saw Devin Carter go into the season as an outside receiver, but really didn't have hardly any success there. When he started making plays was when they moved him to the inside. So I would not be surprised to see Preston Fox or Traylon Ray wind up as a slot receiver possibly, especially if you got Justin Robinson, who I think can emerge as one of the guys on the outside. But really, to me, it's interesting because I think both Justin Robinson and Jaden Bray are good players that could be a starter. And I think the same for Traylon Ray and Hudson Clement. And we saw them just kind of the tip of the iceberg of what they can do last year. From all accounts in the open practices that the media has been able to see, Hudson Clement has really stood out. So is he going to be able to solidify himself into one of these roles? It's a possibility. I think in a lot of ways, this will be kind of done by committee. All of these guys are going to see a lot of playing time, but it's going to be interesting to see who trots out there first on August 31st against Penn State. If I was a betting man, I think that maybe you go with kind of your known commodities more so than the guys you just brought in, and maybe you let Jaden Bray and Justin Robinson kind of work into that game as it progresses. So maybe you do see something similar to what we see here on the screen with Hudson and either Preston or Traylon starting on the outside and then Rodney Gallagher on the inside. But I would not be surprised to even see something like Hudson Clement at X, Preston Fox at Z, and then maybe Traylon Ray sliding into the slot and starting there. We know Preston Fox has played the slot a lot throughout his career as well, so it could be the other way around. But if I was guessing, and I'm forced to make a pick here, that's what I think I would go with. However, I think later on in the season, as the season progresses and they get more acclimated to the system, more used to being here at WVU, and maybe even by the time we're done with fall camp, they could slide up there. But I would not be surprised to see Jaden Bray and Justin Robinson in starting roles by the time it's all said and done. They're both big-bodied receivers, very talented. Jaden Bray can really get open. He has that 206-pound frame. They've been calling him Optimus Prime because of his size. And then Justin Robinson brings something to that room that we don't see from any of these other receivers. If you look, 6'2", 6'1", 5'10", 5'10", 5'11", whereas Justin Robinson goes 6'4" and has good speed to go with that side as well. So I would not be surprised to see him wind up as a starting receiver on this team. So that's what we're talking about as far as the wide receiver position battle there, wide receiver and inside receiver really for sure in this one. Let's talk about another position battle, though. Let's talk a little bit about an interesting one that I think is going to be an ongoing battle here in fall camp. Let me pull up the roster here again and show you guys what we're working with here. And that's right tackle. And I think here at right tackle, it's going to be interesting. Justin Terry not going to factor into the battle necessarily, but Nick Malone and Xavier Bosley I think is going to be a good competition. Obviously, Nick Malone has the experience advantage. He got a ton of reps last year, especially in the latter portion of the season when both Wyatt Milam dealt with an injury for a game or two, and same for Doug Nestor. Nick Malone really filled in as a part-time starter, as I've called both him and Jaquay Hubbard here throughout this offseason that are both maybe transitioning into full-time starter roles. But the interesting thing to note here is, Nick Malone maybe has the experience advantage, but Xavier Bosley definitely probably has the advantage as far as a higher ceiling, maybe a little bit more potential. And when you look at Bosley, he's going to be a redshirt sophomore, but he was a freshman All-American last year at Jacksonville State. And something to note there during his time at Jacksonville State was, of course, it was coached by Rich Rodriguez as the head coach, but the offensive line coach there at Jack State, none other than Rick Trickett. And we all know how highly regarded Rick Trickett is from his time here at WVU, one of the best offensive line coaches ever in the program, in my opinion. Matt Moore doing a great job, though, now with this staff. But Rick Trickett, very highly regarded in the profession as an offensive line coach. So we know Xavier Bosley's been coached up. We know he's going to have that physical edge to him. And we know he's going to be ready to battle with Nick Malone for this spot. But I think it's also, maybe a matter of going with the more experienced guy there to start the season, unless Bosley really blows you away here in fall camp when you get into scrimmages and such. But if we pull back up the official university depth chart here for the preseason that they released in the media guide, we will see that that's kind of exactly, it seems like what they're thinking, at least initially as well, is go with the more experienced guy as Nick Malone listed as the starter. And I was surprised to not see the or in between the names of Nick Malone and Xavier Bosley there at that position. So maybe you do go with Nick Malone there going into game one. And I think that would be my prediction here. If I'm making a prediction on this spot, I think that Nick Malone will probably get to start for Penn State, but I would not be surprised at all. We get towards, the middle portion of the season, the latter portion of the season, if Xavier Bosley doesn't start earning more and more reps and eventually work his way into a potential starting role there at right tackle, because I think he's really talented and maybe has the higher ceiling of the two players there. But nice to see both those guys, battling here throughout the preseason fall camp, and we'll see what happens there. Next up, let's keep talking about the offense, but let's talk about something a little bit different than, starting roles here. We've talked about some starters with the receiver and with the right tackle spot, but let's talk a little bit about now tight end. Let's talk tight end. I want to talk a little bit about this because obviously Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis were your go-to guys there last year, certainly. And, Cole Taylor more of the pass-catching option, but he has been underrated as a blocker. And Traylon Davis really does a heck of a job blocking both pass protection and on run plays. He's a lot of times coming across on that wham block, on the split zone, on the power plays. All of that, he really gets involved there. Not to say Cole Taylor doesn't as well. They both certainly do. But as far as a pass-catching tight end, you're really looking for someone behind Cole Taylor to fill in that role. So that's what I'm talking a little bit about now, is kind of a third tight end or a second pass-catching tight end, if you will. And I think your main two candidates for that are these two guys right here. Greg Genross and Will Dixon are going to be battling in fall camp for that second pass-catching spot behind Cole Taylor, despite the fact that Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis are still going to be the tight ends you see most of the time. If, Cole Taylor needs a rest or low and, knock on wood, something happens like it did last year and Cole Taylor has to miss some action, will one of these two guys be called upon to fill in there? I think Jackson Marco has good potential for the future. He was here for the spring, so that helps. He has a great frame as well. Cole Taylor, 6'7", Greg Genross is 6'7", Jackson Marco is 6'6". So all three of those guys have good size there at that tight end spot. But the thing about Will Dixon is he is the most athletic player in this whole group of tight ends right here. He can really run. He has good speed for a tight end. So he could be a guy that could even, you could hit down the seam that could maybe even take the top off from that tight end position. So could he earn that third tight end role over Greg Genross due to being here longer, due to his experience? Maybe. It really just depends on how long it takes Greg Genross to get acclimated and get used to the scheme here at WVU and get used to, of course, playing at this level versus at the junior college level. But don't underrate Greg Genross. We're talking about, like I said, a 6'7" guy that was the number 1 junior college tight end in the country that's coming to WVU. So I think that this is going to be an interesting battle to see who kind of ends up as the third tight end. Noah Braham's another player that will earn playing time, but I see him more as almost like an H-back, fullback type. If West Virginia needs to bring in a blocking back, much in the way that they used Luke Hamilton at times last season, I think that Noah Braham will fill that role, probably him or walk-on and Colin McBee, but I think Noah Braham's my favorite to do that. But, another battle that we talk about there is the third tight end between Greg Genross and Will Dixon, and I think that's going to be something to watch as fall camp progresses. Overall on the season, I think Greg Genross will get onto the field more and more as the year progresses. I would not be surprised against Penn State, though, if we don't see either one of these guys, and it's really just exclusively Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis getting involved there. As you see here on the university's official media guide, that only Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis are listed here at the tight end position there. So would not be surprised if that is the case against Penn State. But I think down the road, both of those guys, Will Dixon and Greg Genross, will battle for some snaps throughout the 2024 season. So that's another position battle we can talk about. So we've talked about 3 position battles now. Receiver, right tackle, which right tackle to me is one of the most interesting position battles going on in fall camp, and a little bit about the third tight end now as well. Hey, what's going on, Tim? Glad to see you pop in, man. Appreciate you always being in here. Apologies for my dog barking. I think the wife just got home this evening, but Tim's got a question here. 2 young men that left the program with injuries. Who's going to take their place? Are we better off with them gone, or would we be better if they stayed healthy? Well, here's the thing about that, Tim. And I talked about this a little bit. I don't know if you got a chance to see the roster update I did today. I just put that out on the channel today, on the main channel for everyone to be able to have access to, and also did a video for members only, which, of course, Tim, you have access to there for breaking down the Neil Brown press conference, which if you guys haven't yet, use the join button in the video description to become a channel member, and you can get all that bonus content. Going to continue that Presser Point series where I break down Neil Brown's press conference, and that's available to channel members at any level, but also put out a roster update where I talked a little bit about those guys that had to leave the program due to injuries. I think both of them were good contributors. Jaffa Veras really, came into his own as a special teams player last year, was a good leader there on the special teams unit, as Neil Brown mentioned. I was excited to see what Mo Hamilton could do after flipping from offense to defense, as I mentioned in the roster update I did about a week ago. But the thing about it is, Tim, I don't want to necessarily say we're better off without them, but what we did have to do is we had to get to the 85 scholarship limit with fall camp starting. That's when you have to get down to 85 scholarship players. We knew with all the players West Virginia had added via the transfers in the past few months that they were over the scholarship limit still, up to 87 scholarship players at this point. And then, of course, with those 2 guys, medically retiring, medically redshirting, however you want to call it, no longer with the program due to their injuries, West Virginia is now at that 85 scholarship limit that they needed to be for the start of fall camp. So don't want to say we were better off without them, but we had to make a move in some sort. And I think, the silver lining there to me is, you don't want to wish injuries upon anyone, but you also don't want to see anyone hit the transfer portal. So maybe it's the lesser of 2 evils there, but nonetheless, wish both those guys well in their future endeavors. I think both of them were good contributors and good program players while they were here, both being Jaffa Veras and Mo Hamilton. But good question, Tim, for sure. Definitely something that had to happen for West Virginia was to have 2 players leave the roster in some way, and unfortunately it happens via a couple of guys who are forced to medically retire. So having said that, let's talk about one of our other position battles here. And this one is another one that's not necessarily a starting position, but one that I think will be interesting to keep an eye on throughout fall camp. And, maybe as the season progresses, more so than early in the season, because you're never going to make it through a season playing just only 2 running backs, right? So you're going to need a third guy. And I think obviously the favorite is probably Jalen Anderson due to being here and his experience. But also you bring in 2 good freshmen, Dewar Hubbard and Trayvon Dunbar. I've heard very good things about Dunbar. I think he's a little bit more physically ready and capable because of a little bit better size. Pardon me for saying, I'll take a swig of my water, guys. Ooh, been out cutting grass today. Got my throat all dry and itchy, but nonetheless, I think Trayvon Dunbar's got a good chance to battle with Jalen Anderson for that third running back spot. And we can't cut out a couple of walk-ons as well that are still on the roster. Judah Price and Clay Ash. Clay Ash is one that I've really heard good things about. We saw him play a lot in the spring game, maybe trying to get a good look at him. But the third running back spot is something to keep an eye on. I think, Jalen Anderson got into the doghouse a little bit last year with a couple of things that happened. The should have been touchdown against Houston that turned into an interception after he dropped that wheel route into a defensive back's arms. And then I believe it was against UCF or Oklahoma State one. I think it was against UCF. He got back on the field just before halftime. They tried to run a hook and lateral to him. He dropped the lateral. And so after that, he was kind of in the doghouse for kind of the end portion of the 2024 season, which had a lot of people questioning if he would return. He did stick it out and stay here. Got some good reps in the spring, but now I think he finds himself kind of fighting for his proverbial playing time here in the fall camp. As these two freshmen are very talented. We know that this coaching staff's done a great job of finding talented running backs in the past couple of years. 2 years ago, CJ Donaldson really bursting on the scene as a true freshman. Last year, Jaheim White doing the same. So I would not be surprised to see Dior Hubbard or Trayvon Dunbar end up as the third running back potentially by the time it's all said and done. But I think going into game one, if there is a third running back that touches the field, my best guess is probably Jalen Anderson, just in game one at least. But I would not be surprised to see Trayvon Dunbar secure that role as the season progresses. As you see here, we'll pull back up the media guide from the university here. And you can see at running back, they only have two guys listed, which I would kind of be surprised if we see anyone but these two against Penn State. And they have the or in between their names there, and they'll pretty much be co-starters for the entire season, as far as I'm concerned. So that's pretty much all we got on offense. The only other thing that we could really talk about as far as a position battle on offense would be for another third string spot. And that's at quarterback here, where it's nice to actually have four this year. Last year went through the year with only 3 scholarship quarterbacks and one of them being a true freshman. You got another true freshman this year in Khalil Wilkins, but you get the redshirt freshman Ryder Burton, who transferred from BYU. If I had to pick a third stringer, I think it'll certainly be Ryder Burton, but probably won't see either one of these guys, save for maybe against the game against Albany. You might see one of them get some action in that one, but it's going to be Garrett Green and Nico Marchiol carrying the load at quarterback this year. And hopefully, fingers crossed, Garrett Green 90% of the time, and he can stay a little bit more healthy this year. But I also think if, something were to come, hell or high water, and we had to get Nico on the field, it sounds like he has drastically improved. According to, the media that saw the open practice today, he looked really, spot on, as Neil Brown kind of predicted in his press conference, saying that Nico was going to really shine when people saw him. He's really progressed a lot, and that's great news right there as well. So that's kind of what we have as far as offensive position battles. Let's flip it over a little bit. Let's talk about the defensive side, and I want to start it off with, I think, one of the most intriguing ones, and that's here at cornerback. West Virginia brings in a ton of transfers here, obviously looking to fill some roles. They do return some guys. The most, notable of those probably being Jacoby Spells, not to count out Jordan Jackson. Both the Jackson twins, Jordan Jackson and Josiah Jackson, are redshirt freshmen that the coaching staff has been high on. But I think Jacoby Spells, really, especially now hearing that he's progressing better from his injury than they expected. He got on the field today, and, from multiple different reports of media members that I listened to today that watched the open practice, despite being in a green jersey, being limited, he really shined today. Jacoby Spells really made some standout plays. So you got several guys that could factor in here for this starting spot. We're going to leave the freshmen out of this discussion for now. Keon Washington, Chris Henry, and Keyshawn Robinson. Let's talk about these top 6 names here. And a lot of these guys, a couple of them, well, really 3 of them were here for the spring as far as the transfers are concerned, those 3 being Garnett Hollis, Aiden Garnes, and TJ Crandall. I think that Aiden Garnes really shined in the spring and seems like he's all but locked down one of the starting spots. TJ Crandall is a guy that has a really high ceiling. You go look at his offer list when he was in the transfer portal, and it was a who's who of college football programs. Everyone wanted TJ Crandall. West Virginia lands him, and I think he's was banged up in the spring as well. But as he comes back from his injury, I think that he'll get some snaps this season. Dantes Fagan, another addition that brings experience being a redshirt senior. He's played a lot of college football, but he's transferring up from the group of 5 level. So is Aiden Garnes, but I think he's a bit more proven. He was a bit more highly regarded as well. And we've also kind of seen what he can do already. So who do I think earns the start here game 1? It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. That's for sure. Did not mean to hit that, so we'll do that really quickly. But let's pull up the university's media guide again and scroll down here to the cornerback position and see what they have listed here as far as the depth chart there for that portion. This position battle at cornerback. All right. And as we do that here, you see the left cornerback and the right cornerback. Right now, they don't have the or in between either of the starters. So, as far as the preseason depth chart is concerned, Garnett Hollis is listed as a starter on one side, the transfer from Northwestern, which we've heard rave reviews about from the coaching staff since he got here. He played really well at Northwestern as well. And then Aiden Garnes has been the one that's been the most impressive to me, as far as the eye test is concerned, getting to see him in person there at the spring game. I thought he looked good, not only in the game setting, but also in some of the drills that they did. He really shined, got an interception there, and from all accounts, he's been a bit of a ball hawk. And then, second string behind him, they have TJ Crandall or Jordan Jackson listed, whereas behind Garnett Hollis, they have Jacoby Spells as the lone backup and Dantes Fagan as the third string. No or in between those names there. So it looks like, we got these 6 guys battling for these 2 spots. I think going into game 1, I would be surprised if these 2 guys that are listed as the starters here aren't the starters against Penn State, those being Aiden Garnes and Garnett Hollis. But if anyone's going to have a say about stealing one of those spots, it sounds like it could be Jacoby Spells. Still not 100%, still playing with that green jersey on right now, but seems like he's going to be ready to go for game 1, which is something that I was not expecting when I heard about his injury in the spring. So I think that that's a big boost here. And I mentioned TJ Crandall and his huge offer list, his high upside. So I think whether it's Aiden Garnes and Spells or whether it's Aiden Garnes and Hollis, my prediction here is Aiden Garnes and Hollis as the 2 starting corners week 1. But the good side about this, the big silver lining here as opposed to last season, is that this year West Virginia will not have to rely on Aiden Garnes and Garnett Hollis or whoever the 2 starters end up being to be Iron Man and play almost every snap, every game like Malachi Ruffin and Beanie Bishop had to do last year because West Virginia was so thin behind them, whether it be players dealing with injuries or what have you. Those guys had to play far too many snaps, and they end up getting worn down at the end of games and stuff sometimes because of that. I think now where West Virginia's brought in all of these good transfers, if Aiden Garnes needs a breather, TJ Crandall or Jordan Jackson is going to have no trouble stepping in there and providing that breather. Same goes for Garnett Hollis. Jacoby Spells can step in and play, and Dantes Fagan has a ton of experience in college football there, being a redshirt senior, and he could step in and play as well. And don't count out Kokora Tarnu here as well. I know they're more expecting him to play safety, but he did play cornerback at Jacksonville State, so, worst comes to worst, he could transition over there and give you some snaps as well. So you really have 6 or 7 even guys that you trust here across these 2 spots that could see playing time this year, which is a huge upgrade in depth terms as opposed to what West Virginia had last year. You just got to hope that at least one of these guys is even close to being as good as Beanie Bishop was, and I think Aiden Garnes and Garnett Hollis both have that kind of potential. So those are my 2 picks for the starters there in this position battle at cornerback. I'm going to take another swig of my water, guys, and we'll talk about some more position battles here on the defensive side. Oh, see, I'm still muted here, guys. Sorry about that. Forgot to unmute myself. So let me go back over that briefly. I'll try and make it a little bit more brief now. You guys know I'm a culprit for doing that sometimes. I'll try and timestamp it in the comments on the playback that I was muted for, a good 60 seconds, 120 seconds, however long that was. But the next position battle we're going to talk about is the safety spots. Kakora Tarnu and Josiah Jackson at cat safety. And one thing I was mentioning there is I think Kakora Tarnu is probably the most underrated transfer West Virginia brought in. Either him or Justin Robinson, both those two guys, extremely underrated. They're both going to be big-time contributors. So a cat safety position, that's a battle we need to look at. And then at free safety as well, Jaheim Joseph and Anthony Wilson. Anthony Wilson, a lot of people thought kind of underimpressed, I guess, last year. And Jaheim Joseph, they thought would come in and maybe take that spot. We'll see what ends up happening when we get through fall camp. But Jaheim Joseph, another good transfer, coming over from Northwestern, same as Garnett Hollis, both those defensive backs coming over from Northwestern. Northwestern had a very good defense last year, and they were big parts of it and two of the better players on that defense. And then, the other thing we need to talk about here is that these guys can kind of be cross-trained and play multiple positions. Anthony Wilson, Jaheim Joseph can play free or cat, or maybe even play some spear if necessary. Same with Kakora Tarnu and Josiah Jackson. And then we know at spear, Aubrey Burks can play the deep safety, either of the deep safety positions if needed. He has a ton of experience. But for our position battle discussion here, we're going to talk about Anthony Wilson and Jaheim Joseph at free safety and Kakora Tarnu and Josiah Jackson at cat safety. Let me pull up the see here. I got something playing. I don't know how it just started playing. Okay. Okay, I got it muted. All right, let me pull up the media guide again. Let's talk a little bit about the position battle going on at safety now. Talked about several position battles here, guys. If you guys are just popping in, I appreciate you guys. I'll get to some of the comments here momentarily, but, we're kind of on the defensive side of position battles. On the offensive side, the main ones we talked about as far as, up for grabs and starter positions is the slew of bodies that are going to be, up for the 3 receiver positions. And then, of course, the right tackle battle. That's going to be an interesting one to watch as well. And then we were just kind of talking about some of the backup spots on the offensive side. Here on the defensive side, we were first talking about the cornerbacks. And you got, 6 guys that realistically could see snaps at the 2 cornerback positions, which is a huge upgrade depth-wise compared to last year. But now we're talking a little bit about the position battles going on at the 2 safety spots, which is going to be interesting to watch. One of the big surprises for me was seeing the or in between the names of Josiah Jackson and Kakora Tarnu, because I thought that Tarnu would for sure be listed as a starter. And to me, that shows that Josiah Jackson's probably made a big jump that they were hoping that he would make throughout this offseason here, going into his redshirt freshman year now. And so him and Kakora Tarnu will battle at that cat safety spot. Then at the free safety spot, I was maybe just as surprised that the or wasn't listed in between the names of Anthony Wilson and Jaheim Joseph. Like I said, a lot of people were expecting Jaheim Joseph to come in and steal that starting spot, but maybe that means that Anthony Wilson's really made a big jump in his game for this upcoming season as well. We need him to improve in pass coverage. If not, maybe you do a little bit of a two safety system there with maybe Jaheim Joseph playing more on the passing downs, Anthony Wilson playing more in some run situations, as he is known as a good tackler. But I like both of those guys. I like Jackson. I like Tarnu. As far as my prediction here, I think that I would not be surprised to see Joseph steal that spot from Wilson by the time game 1 rolls around, but just not seeing the or, I think I'm going to have to go with the experience, say that Wilson will get to start at free, just be the first one on the field against Penn State, but Jaheim Joseph is going to see plenty of snaps. And then at the cat safety spot, I know the or's in between the names right now, but I think that, once Tarnu gets here on camp, gets to go through a scrimmage or two, I think he's going to solidify himself as a solid player and a starter on this defense. So I think my prediction for cat safety game 1 against Penn State is Tarnu walks out there first. And I've mentioned this a little bit in the game rewatch commentaries that I've been doing for the Almost Heaven level channel members. I love the move of moving Aubrey Burks to the spear position, because if you go watch, some of the film from last year, some of the games in which Aubrey Burks really stood out, some of his standout plays were really when he was coming screaming downhill, forcing TFLs in the run game. And so getting him closer to the line of scrimmage at that spear spot, I think is really going to be beneficial to his game. And I like that as well. So that's what we're talking about as far as the position battle amongst the safety position. Come here and touch up on some comments really quick, and then we will get back to talking about some more position battles here. Yeah, no, I forgot to unmute myself after I took that swig of water. I got to dry, scratchy throat tonight, guys. So I've been trying to mute my mic when I cough and such, but you know me, sometimes I forget to hit the mute button again on the soundboard, but we got it back, and then I just kind of went back over what I said. And like I said, I'll timestamp it in the comments of the video once the playback's up to let people know that I'm muted from X amount of time to X amount of time. What's going on, Silas, Eric? Good to see you guys in here, man. Definitely getting ready for kickoff. That's right, Eric, for sure. Timothy says, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really wanting to beat Penn State bad this year. Me too, man. Me too. Even more so when I think about them not taking that knee at the end of the game, it really just fires me up. That's something that I keep going back to was James Franklin punching in that late touchdown. I really just want to beat that smug dude so bad. Tim says he's watched every game replay with my commentary. It's been great, and he thanks me for doing so. Hey, I really appreciate that, Tim, man. That's awesome. That means a lot to me that you're enjoying that. I think we got, 4 games left of the 2023 regular season and then the bowl game, so hopefully have those out here in the next couple of weeks. And my plan, we'll definitely get them all done before August 31st rolls around. So hey, if you guys haven't yet, and you want to catch some of those game rewatch commentaries, it's a lot of fun just going back, rewatching the WVU games, providing my commentary. So not only will you have, 8 games to watch now if you join, become a channel member at the Almost Heaven level, but also one of the perks of joining at that Almost Heaven level is you get to request a game you'd like me to rewatch, as long as it's one that I can find on YouTube, on the internet. Just shoot me the email, countryroadswebcast@gmail.com, if you join at that Almost Heaven level, and let me know what game you'd like for me to rewatch there for you Almost Heaven level members. But that's been a lot of fun, Tim. I'm glad you're enjoying that. And I also just put up a presser points video today for all channel members at every level, where I kind of broke down Neil Brown's opening press conference of fall camp as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. Eric said he really wants to beat Penn State. Watched Forrest earlier, and I think he thinks we can win. Said he thinks he forgot to like the video. I watched that one too, actually, or I listened to it rather while I was cutting grass. But yeah, Forrest did a great job breaking that down. The comments of Zach Seco, because he was kind of saying West Virginia had no path to victory, which is absolutely absurd. He's from the Not Locked On Nittany Lions show, but Forrest did an awesome job there as well. I checked that one out. If you guys haven't watched that, head over to WVU Football Going Deep's channel and watch a good breakdown there. Hey, Kenny, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here. Haven't seen you in here live in a little bit, man. I'm glad to see you back in here. Kenny said, this is the most excited I've ever in my life seen this much talent. I know, man. And I think, that's one of the things Neil Brown was talking about as well in his press conference, was the team really just looking like a, Power 4 contending team now as well, which is a big thing. It's a really big thing for sure. It really is. All right. Let's hop back into the position battles here. Let's pull up the roster tracker again. Let's talk about a couple more on the defensive side that we've got to discuss. We've talked about corner. We've talked about safety. Let's talk about the linebackers. I think this is interesting as well, because much like the cornerback position, last year we didn't have a ton of depth, especially after the injuries hit us. We were really thin there. And I think this year we have, at least 4, maybe 5 guys that will see some extensive playing time across these 2 linebacker spots. And, of course, we've also added a couple freshmen in Curtis Jones and Ricky Williams. But as far as the Will and Mike linebackers, I'm not going to include the Spur in this discussion. I think that that's a little bit more decided. I think Tyron Bradley will kind of be the go-to starter. But Ty French may be the best pure pass rusher on this team. He's going to get some reps, especially in passing situations, and he will see some time there as well. But as far as the Mike and Will linebackers, I think that these 5 names right here are the ones that we're going to be looking at to play across those 2 spots, which is a great problem to have, because you're going to have a 2 deep at each position and then kind of a 5th guy that you can rotate in there. And I think all of these guys really talented. Obviously, Trey Latham, we saw what he could do last year in the first 4 games before he suffered that horrific leg injury, and he was on his way to, probably a freshman All-American type of season, an All-Big 12 type of season. So I really like him. He's extremely athletic, but has good size to go with that athleticism. And the one guy that has me super excited about the linebacking core alone, though, is Josiah Trotter, man. He just brings not only the pedigree, with his father being Jeremiah Trotter, his brother being Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who was at Clemson, I believe, just got drafted in the NFL draft. So he has the pedigree. But, man, when you look at the linebackers on the field, even going back to the spring, and I'm sure he's probably even increased more in size now, going through the summer workout program with Mike Joseph, but Josiah Trotter just looks different than any other linebacker, not only on the roster, but any linebacker in recent memory at WVU. He looks like an NFL player out there on the field, and he's only a redshirt freshman, which is crazy. So Trotter, I think, is extremely talented. and then you go to the other guys. Ben Cutter got a ton of reps last year, called upon really probably before he was ready and forced into a ton of action. But, that right there, you get some growing pains with that, obviously. He took some lumps with that. But what it does is it speeds up his development also. So now, heading into his sophomore year, he's got a ton of film on, what he did wrong that he's been able to look at throughout this offseason and be able to make corrections. And I expect his game to be really improved. And also, he probably won't have to be thrust into a starting role again. He'll probably be in more of a reserve role where he can do some spot duty things and really, take those things that he learned and improved on them and continue to learn more now behind some really talented linebackers. And he'll also be there with Reed Carrico, who, as far as recruiting goes, he's probably, the highest regarded coming out of high school of anyone that we have on this roster. Maybe we're talking about a guy that was a top 5 linebacker recruit in the country coming out of high school, went to Ohio State. They have a few guys ahead of him. They also had some a senior laden linebacker squad last year that really kept him off the field. So he decides to hit the portal. We get lucky and land him, and that's a player with another high pedigree that's going to really factor into this rotation. And then by all accounts, Caden Bizer, a former walk-on, just recently earned a scholarship in the past year or so. He's made a big jump in his game this offseason, is going to be able to help at these 2 positions as well. So that's 5 guys across these 2 spots. So let's pull up the media guide one more time and see what they're thinking of preseason-wise as far as the university is concerned. All right, and if we look here, it's Will linebacker, Mike linebacker, but really one thing we learned last year is that these 2 roles are almost interchangeable, so much so that when I was doing my depth chart updates last year, I just kind of even just started listing both as the linebackers because, one guy would line up at Mike one game, and the next game he'd be at Will, and the other guy would be at Mike, and vice versa. So, it's Ben Cutter and Lee Koba kind of flipping back and forth between those roles. So for now on the depth chart at Will linebacker, we have Josiah Trotter with the or in between him and Ben Cutter, which I think speaks to maybe Ben Cutter's improvement because I thought for sure Josiah Trotter would be definitely the starter. But look at the size here of these linebackers, 240, 232, right at 230, right at 230, just a little bit below 230. And, Reed Carrico, 6'2", Trotter, 6'2", Lathan, 6'1", nearly 230 pounds, and he has extremely good speed for his size as well. He's very athletic. So, if I'm looking at this and I'm predicting who the 2 starters are, I think for me, I'm easily going to say that going into game 1, the first 2 linebackers that tried out on the field, no pun intended, Josiah Trotter and Trey Lathan, which Trey Lathan is listed as the starter at Mike. Josiah Trotter still listed as a co-starter, but I'd be extremely shocked if Josiah Trotter isn't a starter on this team. I think he could have even maybe been a starter last year if he didn't suffer that injury in the preseason. So hopefully everyone stays healthy throughout this fall camp because we have great depth here in the back half of the defense. We talked about the cornerbacks, how you got 6 guys that could earn playing time across those 2 spots. And then here at this linebacker spot, you see the 5 names listed, and probably all of these guys will get some snaps throughout the season. Like I said, my prediction is Lathan and Trotter get the start, but I think you will see plenty of the other guys throughout the season. Bizer and Carrico listed with the or in between their names as the second teamer behind Lathan, which I think that speaks to Bizer's improvement, the fact that he is, listed with the or with Reed Carrico, who I thought for sure would at least be one of these second string spots. But hey, the fact that Caden Bizer's battling is a good thing for sure. But definitely 5 guys there across those 2 spots is great depth to have and a good problem to have. But I think Trotter and Lathan are just kind of a notch above the others, in my opinion. I think they're both going to be very impressive. And to me, one of the reasons that West Virginia's defense, I think, will be greatly improved is not only the depth here, but just the talent that both Lathan and Trotter bring, not to mention, the size at that position is something that West Virginia hasn't had in quite some time. So that's what I'm thinking as far as the linebacker position battle. Let me come back, touch up with some of your all's comments real quick after I take a swig of my water. I'll try and remember to unmute the mic this time. But just 1 second, guys. I'll touch on some of your all's comments, and then we'll talk about a couple more position battles, and then I'll just touch on some little tidbits that the university has dropped, some players on watch lists, and a cool little hype video they released today as well. Now that we're in, game month, guys, August is here. So some fun stuff here before we get ready to close out before too much longer. But, any questions you guys got, any thoughts on these position battles, throw them in there. I'll try and catch up on some of y'all's comments here after I take this swig of water. All right, I unmuted it this time. I double checked. I'm good. We're good, guys. All right. Let's see. Silas says Coach Brown was fired up for fall camp, and the players are fired up and confident. This season is going to be special, folks. Couldn't agree more, Silas. I think we're in for a real treat here in 2024. And I think the best part about it is they're still keeping that chip on their shoulder that they had last year. They may not have been picked 14th, but until, they're picked in the top, 5 of the conference, they're probably still going to have that chip on their shoulder. They're still not being mentioned. Neil Brown mentioned even in his press conference, it's one of the things I touched on in the Presser Points video I dropped for all channel members today, was that, Jaheim White, he didn't get any questions about Jaheim White at Big 12 Media Days, which is a shocker. So, even Jaheim's being undervalued nationally. Garrett Green's being undervalued nationally. A lot of our players are, so that, chip on their shoulder remains. They're going to be motivated heading into the season, and I definitely think we are in for a special season. It's going to be an absolute treat, Silas. Couldn't agree more. And, Neil Brown, I'll pull up a comment from him here in a minute that I want to share on the screen with you guys where he says just that he's, maybe more fired up than he's ever been as a coach, which really should tell you something. Eric asks, why not rewatch a game live and get everyone in with it, bring in Paul and some other guys? There's only one caveat to that, Eric. I'd love to do it with, Paul and other people as well, and I'll rewatch a game live. But the thing is, those videos get copyrighted if you put them up on the main channel. So that's why, I put them up on as members only videos, because then, it doesn't affect the channel with a copyright claim or anything like that, because you don't have to monetize it then where it's up for members only. So that's why, the game rewatches and stuff are all going to be, members only videos, because I can't, share anything on the screen that really ESPN puts out or anything like that. Even little highlight clips from ESPN get copyright claimed and stuff. And then you end up just having to scratch them from the video or delete the video entirely, what have you. But, if you do them as members only videos, they don't. But who knows? Maybe I'll try and get them guys in on it as well. But definitely have a ton of game rewatches up there, 4-channel members at the Almost Heaven level, which is only, I think, $4.99 a month. And, but even if you join at the Wild and Wonderful level, which is $2.99 a month throughout the season, there's going to be a ton of bonus content there. Not necessarily the game rewatches. Those are going to be at the Almost Heaven level. But I will probably do, cruise film reviews, snap count series. I'm going to have the Presser Point series, depth chart updates, injury reports, and all that. So it's definitely extremely beneficial. You get a little bit of extra content, but that is a good idea and something to keep in mind for sure. I'd love to be able to do it on the main channel, but, copyright and stuff, YouTube terms of service, and of course ESPN being assholes as well. Unfortunately, anything that you put up from them, they just automatically, boom, like clockwork, it's done. So unfortunately, but that's a good idea, man. I appreciate the thought. Tim says maybe we could rewatch the 2012 Orange Bowl. What do you think, man? Hey, that'd be a fun one to rewatch, man. I've rewatched that one so many times. I could have probably, I'll tell you what plays coming up, but I haven't done it probably in a couple years. Usually that's my tradition to go through each preseason. Of course, I got them here in the background now. I got you remember the highlight DVDs they used to make? I think I've got 04, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08. And 09, which I think 09 is the last one that they made and put out on DVD. Now, of course, they just kind of put those up on YouTube or whatever, or something kind of similar with the game recaps they do after each game instead of doing that. But man, I wish they'd go back to making those DVDs again. Those were my favorite. So usually in the preseason, about this time when it gets to game month, I kind of go through, rewatch those DVDs, because I've got the bowl game in between each of those seasons as well. So, I'd watch like the 05 season, then I'd watch the Sugar Bowl, watch the 06 season and watch the Gator Bowl, watch the 07 season, watch the Fiesta Bowl, and so on and so forth. So I'll definitely probably get to that as far as my own. And hey, when I get to the Orange Bowl, maybe we'll do the rewatch for it for the channel members for sure. Hey, if that's the one you want, Tim, you got it, man. You got the ability to request it there at the Almost Heaven level. So I can make it happen, man. It might be, a little bit later because I got to get through the 4 game rewatches in the bowl game before the 31st, but we'll definitely get to doing that Orange Bowl rewatch for you though, for sure, man. Kenny says, I love to watch film. I watched the GG interview and Sean Martin interview. Fired me up. Woohoo. Yeah, if you guys haven't checked that one out yet, Garrett Green, Sean Martin, and I believe Wyatt Milam as well had the player interviews today. So, you can definitely tell the season's here, man. Got the coach press conference yesterday, got the player interviews today, and they all got me super excited, especially GG talking about, his goal, Big 12 title. That's his goal. And he's mentioned that not only in that interview, but also on the 3 Guys Before the Game podcast, which is really good. If you guys haven't checked that out, check that out as well. Silas said, this is probably hard to answer, but how much do you think we actually see RG3 playing DB? Yeah, that's interesting as well, Silas. Here's kind of my thoughts on it because as I talked a little bit about in the cornerback position battle, we've got like 6 guys that are battling for those 2 spots already. And of course, you add Rodney Gallagher in there, that's 7 guys. So I think for me, the way that he's, excuse me. Killing me, guys. I'm killing me. Sorry. I think for me, he has a chance. I think he was playing the nickel spot throughout the spring, but part of me wonders how much of that was due to necessity with Spells out, Crandall out. You had a few guys there that weren't playing throughout the spring, and you really needed some bodies there to get reps there in the spring. So that's one reason he started playing there, I think. But the fact that he changed his number to 24 shows me that it is a possibility that he could play there some in the fall. How much? I'm not sure. I think it's maybe something where they ease him into it. Maybe like against Albany, we'll see him get on the field on the defensive side some. And if, he impresses when they watch film again, maybe he works his way into that rotation a little bit more in battles with some of those other guys. I think he's got a chance. He's got the athleticism. He has the ability for sure. It just depends on how quickly he's acclimated to it. But the fact that he's undergone the jersey number change to be able to touch the field on the defensive side certainly means that they think it's a possibility that he could play there this fall. If I'm a betting man, I think it's more of an for insurance purposes type thing, because they saw what they went through last year when they got thin due to injuries and they only had to play, 2 cornerbacks for kind of the entire season last year. And they don't want to have that problem again. They have plenty of insurance policies now, plenty of guys that can get reps. But if they were, knock on wood, to get hit with the injury bug again, he's someone that they think they could rely on down the line in the season if need be. Let's see if we got any other things here. Watch party not showing the game is always fun. That's a good point, Silas. I've actually kind of thought about doing that for the upcoming season. Obviously, home games, I'm going to be in Morgantown, but maybe a couple of the away games this year, we could potentially do that. Just do a live stream, because my TV is literally like right here. It's up. Obviously you guys can't see it, but it's like straight behind where my camera is. So I'm looking at my TV right now, and it's not that much different than looking at the camera. So I could easily have the game up on my TV, just mute the sound, or maybe even hook up my headphones and hear the sound in there, and just kind of talk about the game as it progresses with you guys, as you guys watching your own TVs. That's a good idea, Silas. Golden Blue Dude used to do that. He said, "Hey, miss that guy, man." Love Golden Blue Dude. He did some awesome content. But that's something to keep in mind maybe when the season rolls around. And that would be for everybody here on the main channel to do, a game watch along. Obviously couldn't show the game on the screen, but we could all be watching the game together and me talk about it. You guys share your thoughts in the chat as well. So for away games this year, I might try and do that for a couple of them. We'll see how it pans out. Pitt game watch party. Hey, that'd be the one to do it for, man. Man, because you know what else I could do? I couldn't. Brad's living in another state right now, so I don't know if maybe we could get him to join virtually. But I could try and get Steven to come over here as well, and me and Steven both could watch the game here and do it in a live stream with you guys and do a little watch party. I'm gonna reach out to him and see what he thinks, man. Because if we're gonna do it for any away games, that's got to be one of them, right? Got to be one of them. For sure. It's got to be one of them. But let's get back here to the position battles. Got at least a couple more, or maybe at least one more that I want to talk about here on the defensive side, and then one on the special teams aspect I want to talk about. So on the defensive side here, and the other one that I want to talk about is kind of the defensive line in general, because I think one thing that we heard Neil Brown talk about is a lot of these guys can play multiple of these spots. He mentioned Eddie V and Asani Redwood could play defensive tackle or nose tackle. Same with Hammond Russell. I think you mentioned Sean Martin, TJ Jackson being able to play inside or outside. TJ Jackson, really highly rated transfer. He's probably, as far as PFF grades, the highest rated of the transfers that we brought in. So going to be interesting to see how they split those reps up between him and Sean Martin. Obviously, probably both those guys can be on the field at the same time sometimes, but I don't know how much we'll see that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how these reps are split up along the defensive line. And another thing to note is, of course, Corey McIntyre Jr. out for this year, or at least most of this year. Neil Brown did say that he hopes that he can come back in the latter portion of the season. So he mentioned that, whether it's Elijah Kinsler, whether it's Zach Keith, or whether it's Nate Gabriel, Orion Fisher still coming back from injury, not 100% yet, but he said that they do need, Zach Keith, Kinsler, or Nate Gabriel, one of those guys to step up and take some reps so they can have, the kind of depth that they had last year across this defensive line. But let's pull up the media guide one more time here and talk a little bit about the defensive line position battle. So defensive end, obviously Sean Martin's going to be your starter there. He's a guy that Neil Brown's talked about maybe even working and playing himself into being a first-round draft pick if he can make that big leap in his game here for his senior year. But look at the experience there. 3 seniors listed. Sean Martin and, of course, TJ Jackson, the transfer from Troy, who was their best defensive player. He's going to get a lot of reps even though he's not going to be starting. He's going to play some. And then, of course, Torrey Simmons been here as a program guy for a long time. A little bit smaller than some of the other defensive linemen you see, only going about 250. But then the nose tackle spot, you get the co-starting role between Fatorma Mulba and Hammond Russell, which to me tells me that Hammond Russell's made a big jump this offseason because Mulba really stood out in the reps that he got last year. I know we lost Mike Lockhart to transfer, but a lot of times last year, Mulba, if you guys remember my player grade series that I did where I always put the, do a video post-game giving out the top 5 offensive player PFF grades and the top 5 defensive player PFF grades. Fatorma Mulba was in a lot of those videos. He was one of the top 5 graded players on defense in a lot of games for PFF grades. Now, some of that's because he's getting less snaps, so, he makes an impact. He's going to grade out pretty high with his low snaps, but it also shows that he's talented and he's ready to step into a starting role. And, 6'4", 310, Hammond Russell, 6'3", 310, both great size. So I think both those guys are going to be good players this year at that spot. And then defensive tackle, obviously Eddie V, Steady Eddie, as I like to call him. He's very consistent. Probably one of the more underrated players on West Virginia's roster just because he's kind of like, Tim Duncan when he used to play for the Spurs. He just kind of steady, just did the same thing and was always consistently getting the job done, but he wasn't somebody that the media ever talked about a ton. I think Eddie V's kind of like that on WVU. He's just the guy that's always there making the right plays, doing what he's supposed to do, but, he's not flashy, so you don't talk about him a ton. That's why I call him Steady Eddie, man, because he's consistent. So I love Edward Vesterinen, and I think Asani Redwood, unfortunately, he's battled the injury bug since he came to West Virginia, but this guy racked up a ton of sacks in high school, man. He's got a lot of potential. So I think you look, and a lot of people were concerned about the depth on West Virginia's defensive line. But you look, Sean Martin, TJ Jackson, Fatorma Mulba, Hammond Russell, Eddie V, Asani Redwood, right there, that's 6 guys. If you played Torrey Simmons some, that gets you to 7. And then, you mentioned those freshmen needing to step up. If at least one of those guys do, that's 8 guys you can play there, which is pretty good depth, especially considering you're only playing, 3 defensive linemen, essentially. So you got 8 guys. That's almost a rotation of, 3. If you could add one more, you'd get to 9. But last year, they could play about 9 or 10 guys. But if you can play 7 or 8 this year, I think that's definitely plenty, especially when you got guys that are going to eat up a lot of reps. Guys like Sean Martin, TJ Jackson, Fatorma Mulba, Hammond Russell, Eddie V. All those guys are going to play a ton. So I think that you get 7 or 8 deep, you still have good depth here along the defensive line. And, that's one thing about this defense this year. Last year, they had depth on the defensive line, didn't have it on the back end. This year, they have depth across the board on the defensive line, as we've kind of talked about as we went through these position battles. My predictions here for game 1, Sean Martin's going to get to start at D-end. Nose tackle, I think it's going to be for Fatorma Mulba still yet, despite the or there. And then Steady Eddie's going to start there at the defensive tackle spot. So that's kind of my predictions for those position battles. And that almost wraps us up here. The last thing that I want to talk about as far as position battles is concerned is the return men. Now, right now, this is obviously a preseason depth chart. Here at kick returner, they have Hudson Clement and Preston Fox. Punt returner, they have Preston Fox and Rodney Gallagher. I think Preston Fox did a pretty good job last year as the punt returner. Would not be surprised to see him retain that role. I think kick returner is kind of the role that's really up for grabs. West Virginia needs to improve both on kickoff coverage and, of course, on the kick return game. And when we're talking about kick returners, Hudson Clement and Preston Fox, they may factor in there. But I think there's some other guys to talk about there in that group. And let me pull up the roster track here so I can bring up some of these other names that I think could factor in at the kick returner battle. One of the main ones for me that I think is my dark horse to maybe be our kick returner by the time the season rolls around is right here. Dom Collins. From where I'm at down here in Mercer County, This guy ran, what was it, a 4.21, it was a 4.2 something 40-yard dash when he came up to camp at West Virginia. He's extremely, extremely fast, and he is a dominant kick returner. He ran several kicks and punts back in high school. He has experience doing it. He could factor in at either one, but I would not be surprised at all to see Dom Collins factor in as West Virginia's kick returner down the line. Rodney Gallagher could get some reps there. Day Farmer's another speedy guy that could get some reps there. And then let's not count out Jaheim White. We want to preserve Jaheim White. We don't want him to get injured, so maybe you don't put him back on kick returns, but he's so explosive that if he can make a difference there, you almost have to. But I think, for me, I don't want to risk it. I don't want to put him back there. I love the guy so much. I want him to get as many reps at the running back position as he can. Don't want to risk him, but like I said, with that explosiveness, it's kind of hard not to. But for me, I think that Dom Collins is my dark horse to maybe get that role as a kick returner. We'll see what happens once we get into fall camp here in the next couple of weeks and see who all plays that role. Let's not count out some guys on the defensive side that may get some reps there as well. Could it be Jordan Jackson? Could it be Keyshawn Robinson? Could Jacoby Spells get involved there? Perhaps. I don't think any of these safeties will get involved. I think really you're looking at the two names that they've listed on the depth chart, which are Hudson Clement and Preston Fox. Then I think Rodney Gallagher, Day Farmer, Dom Collins are candidates. And I keep doing that on accident. And then, of course, maybe Jaheim White or a guy like Jalen Anderson. Maybe that's a way that they keep him involved and don't get him upset. Maybe if he doesn't get that third running back spot, maybe they say, hey, why don't you try out kick returner? Maybe you can be our kick returner. So there's some guys that I think could get some reps there this fall. I think if I'm making a prediction for kick returner, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Dom Collins could be West Virginia's kick returner this season. I think he's that special, that much of a difference maker on special teams. And, it's a way to get him on the field. I don't know how much he'll get to play a receiver. I think, as we progress through the season, he can get some reps there. But I think, two guys that I think are going to get plenty of opportunities to maybe do that is Dom Collins and Day Farmer. So watch out for those guys at the kick returner spot. Punt returner, I would be surprised if game one it's not Preston Fox, because he didn't really do anything to cause him to lose the job last year unless, Rodney Gallagher or somebody else that's back there fielding him throughout the fall camp really shines and can overtake him for that spot. I'd be surprised if it's not Preston Fox. So that's kind of my prediction for the final position battle I want to talk about, guys. So those are kind of my picks for the spots here that we've talked about. I mean, receiver, right tackle, cornerback, safety, linebacker, kick returner, punt returner, defensive line. We've talked about a ton of position battles here, so really enjoyed getting to preview some of those here, and we'll keep an eye on all of them as we progress through fall camp and see who ends up where when we get to, game one and they hopefully release a depth chart before the Penn State game. If James Franklin doesn't release one, we probably won't release one, so we'll have to wait until they trot out there on August 31st maybe to see who wins some of these battles, but hopefully we'll be able to keep ear enough close to the ground to be able to know who's ahead in some of these as we get through some of these scrimmages. Once we get through the first scrimmage, get a couple weeks into camp, that's probably when we'll start to see the light at the end of the tunnel for some of these position battles and see who ends up where. But that's what I had as far as the position battle preview segment, guys. Yeah, I know, man. Those tickets for the Penn State game are insane. That's really one of the main things that made me finally pull the trigger on season tickets, because I was looking, I think, on StubHub, and I literally was seeing tickets for $200 and $300, and I was like, I can pay, just a little bit more than that and get season tickets. So finally I did that. It was a bucket list thing for me, though. Been, wanting to do that my whole life. Finally got the chance to do it this year. So got season tickets for the upcoming season. So I'll be there to watch them play Penn State. But yeah, I understand that single game price is insane, man. It is insane for sure. Probably, yeah, definitely going to be a sellout. Day Farmer can do it, Kenny says. I agree, man. I think he's going to be a candidate as well. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate the kind words, man. Appreciate the kind words. Eric says, used to live at the pre-departments across from the Ronald McDonald House at the stadium. Kegs tapped at 7 a.m. after we blasted country roads, but he prefers the couch with a 70-inch TV and a bathroom. Hey, I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you. I got the 70-inch or two. It's nice on away games and stuff like that for sure. And usually I take it in, at home, especially recent seasons. When I was starting the show, I lived in Florida back in 2018, and then finally moved back to to West Virginia in 2020, and have been able to go to a few games a year since then. And that's kind of been My thing is, like I said, I've never had season tickets, so I usually would make it to, a game, 2, maybe 3 at most throughout the season. So this year it's going to be nice to get to go to 7 of those things. It's going to be the first time I've ever been to that many in one season, so it's going to be fun. But I don't blame you, man. I have no problem watching the game on TV, and sometimes it's even better there with the better picture, and also it's nice because you can throw out some thoughts on social media and stuff if you want to. When you're in the stadium, good luck getting your phone to work to do any of that. So, yeah, for sure. I don't blame you there, Eric. All right, guys, that's what we have as far as position battles. I just want to touch on a few little tidbits here. If you guys got any other questions, throw them in the chat. I'll touch up with you guys one more time. We'll get ready to wrap this up before too long, but I do want to touch on some of these little news and notes tidbits as well. But any questions, comments, concerns, throw them in there, guys. But let's talk about some Mountaineers that are on watch lists here. We got Preston Fox announced for the Paul Hornig Award watch list, which is given to the it's kind of like an all-purpose award. I think Tavon Austin won this, or was close to winning this. I can't remember right off, but he certainly was up there in the voting for the Paul Hornig Award. So, it's worth Preston Fox being a potential punt return man. That's one of the reasons he's popping up on this list, especially if he ends up having a kick return role as well, because it's someone that, makes plays with all-purpose yardage, not only on offense, but also special teams as well. He's on the watch list for the Paul Hornig Award. We have that one. And then we also have a few others to talk about here. Garrett Green up for the Danny Werfel Trophy, which is, I believe, given to quarterbacks around the country. He's up for the watch list for the All-State Werfel Trophy. And then we have, if I could pull up the right tab here. Speaking of specialists, we were talking about return man Austin Brinkman. Maybe one of the best long snappers in the entire country, guys. That's not hyperbole when I say it. Literally, he's that good. And the fact that he's popping up on the Patrick Manley Award watch list shows you that the rest of the nation highly regards him as well. Very good long snapper is Austin Brinkman, and he's up for the Patrick Manley Award. We're talking about a guy that could end up as a long snapper in the NFL. That's how talented he is. So he gets on the award watch list there. And then, of course, a couple more here. 2 guys that are very highly regarded for this upcoming season, one of which has a chance to be a first-round draft pick, and I think is in the first round in a lot of mock drafts, and that's Wyatt Milam. And he's on the watch list for the Outland Trophy given to one of the best linemen in the country, and he is going to definitely be a candidate, I think, when this comes down the line at the end of the season. I think he was probably the most underrated offensive lineman West Virginia had last year. A lot of the talk was about Zach Frazier, and rightfully so. Zach Frazier is outstanding. He's going to be a starting center for the Steelers and probably have a great career in the NFL. But, if you go look at the film a lot last year when West Virginia ran, they ran to the left side a lot because Wyatt Milam was a great anchor on that side, especially on those outside zone plays. And, the game that he missed, West Virginia really missed him. I believe that was the Houston game, if I'm not mistaken. And it really hurt West Virginia's outside run a little bit in that game because he's such a talented player. West Virginia kind of had to switch up their game plan a little bit without him on the field. So getting him showing up on this Outland Trophy watch list, no big surprise. He's in for a special season. I think he's the best left tackle in the country personally. But I'm biased, of course. And then last, but certainly not least, saved one of the best award watch list honors for last, and that's Garrett Green being on the Maxwell Award watch list, which is, kind of like the Player of the Year award in college football, or at least one of those. We know the Heisman's the more highly regarded, but a lot of times, somebody wins the Maxwell or is a finalist for the Maxwell, they're also going to be a finalist for the Heisman. So, that shows that Garrett Green is not being undervalued nationally too much. At least people are giving him some type of recognition. I think, getting on the preseason watch list, there's a lengthy one, but we want to see him be, a semifinalist towards the end of the season and then a finalist when the season wraps up for this Maxwell Award watch list. And if he's on that finalist list come the end of the season, West Virginia's had a very special season where we're probably playing in Arlington in Jerry World there for a Big 12 title, which is his goal. He said in his interview today, doesn't really have any personal goals other than making the Big 12 title, which is something you love to hear from your quarterback. So we had those. And then something else I wanted to touch on. I don't remember if I got a chance to touch on it last stream. Pardon me if I did, but game promos have been announced. Maybe some people didn't get to see it last time, but we got the Strike the Stadium announced for Penn State. It's going to be the Strike the Stadium game. The Gold Rush is going to be for Albany. And then, of course, Kansas is the I'm not sure what that one is, these two. Kansas and Iowa State. Maybe they're ones they're going to announce later. I'm not sure. But maybe they're up there because they're candidates for the potential Gold Rush game. Not 100% sure on that one. Homecoming for Kansas State. Military appreciation for Baylor. And the True Blue game will be against UCF, which will also be Senior Day. So wanted to touch on those a little bit as well. Oh, Big Dan T with the super chat. Appreciate that, Big Dan T, man. Means a lot. Do I think Rodney G now with time in the offense, he will break out? I personally really do, man. That's one of the things, going through the season last year, I understand why he wasn't, utilized more in the downfield passing game. But I think, they utilized him a ton. Jet sweeps, reverses, ends around, screens, things like that. I think that this year we're going to really see him come into his own. I mentioned there in the position battles, he's got a chance to maybe even be one of the return men. If that's another way to get him on the field and get the ball in his hands, we definitely need to do so because Rodney Gallagher, if you go look at the all-time recruits at West Virginia, he's in the top 20 highest-rated recruits West Virginia's ever landed. So I think last year was a little bit of him getting acclimated to playing receiver, getting used to the position, getting used to the game at the college level. Now, not only having done that already and getting, good snaps and doing so and really making an impact on a lot of his touches last year, I think now he's had the offseason to go through the strength and conditioning program, get his body more prepared, increase his size, probably even get faster, which is scary to think about with his already quick twitch ability and his elusiveness. I think they're going to have plenty of ways to draw up to get him the ball. That's not only the way they used him last year with the, the touch pass and the reverses and things like that. I think we're going to see Rodney Gallagher maybe take the top off defenses some this year as well. Last year we brought EJ Horton in a lot to do that. He's no longer on the roster. One guy that's a candidate to fill that role, I think, is Rodney Gallagher. So I would not be surprised at all if he's one of the breakout players on the offense, Big Dan T. Really appreciate the super chat, man, and I appreciate the question as well. But I do think so, man. I do. And the other things that I've got here is one, we kind of touched on this briefly a little bit earlier. I'll come back and touch on your all's comments one more time. Just want to share these last little news tidbits. And this one's the quote from Neil Brown that really got me excited. I think it got a lot of you guys excited as well in his press conference because he says he's fired up about this group. It's year 22 for him as a coach and year 10 as a head coach. And he's probably as excited as he's been in his career. He really feels comfortable with our staff. The support areas are really strong, and he loves the leadership of the team. If you look at the guys that have been here and have grown through the culture, he's really pleased with where that's at. So, trust the climb. A lot of people like to make fun of it, but literally that's something that you needed to do because they knew that they could get to this point, but that it was going to take time. And guess what? All the hardships that we endured over the first, 4 years of the tenure, this is what the payoff is going to be starting this year in 2024. I know last year was a good year as well, but I think that was just tip of the iceberg. I think we're really about to see something special this year. And I think Neil Brown senses it as well. I think you see the quiet confidence from the players in their interviews today. But this quote from Neil Brown got me super excited for the season. I'm jacked as can be. Didn't think I'd get any more hype, but after hearing him talk about this as well and the confidence he has in this team, and it's across the board. He's not only mentioning the players and leadership, but even the support staff, everything down to the nutrition team, everything in the culture. He feels like is exactly where it needs to be, where they've been trying to get it throughout their time here. They have it there now, and they're ready to roll. And it's going to be a special year because of it. So definitely wanted to share that comment. And then let me come back, touch up on some of your all's comments really quick one more time. Then I want to share this little video that's going to get you guys hype. WVU Football's media team, we know they do a great job. Always like to share some of their work here in these live streams, whether it's, the game recaps after wins or the game trailers before games. They also always do great stuff. But today they put out a video since it's August. We're in game month. Put out an awesome hype video I'm going to share with you guys here momentarily before we close out. That'll be the last thing I've got to share. But before I do, let me try and catch up on some of your all's comments here if we've got any more in here. Timmy Green says he would love to see Garrett Green win the Heisman Trophy. How poetic would that be? Just if you think about it, if you guys remember, Garrett Green was the first commitment Neil Brown got when he came to West Virginia in his first full recruiting class. And, Garrett Green sat around, waited his turn, stuck with Neil Brown, and got his chance to be the starter finally. And how crazy would it be if, in his senior year, him being the first recruit that Neil Brown brought in, they go together, they win a Big 12 title, he is a Heisman finalist and, brings home the hardware for the first time in WVU history. That would be so awesome, man. And if we have a special season, he's going to be a big part of it. And if he's a big part of it and has the season that I think he can have rather, he could be a candidate for sure. Kenny says he thinks that Garrett can, if his accuracy is up to 62%. Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be a big jump. That's what they say. They think that he can get into the 60s, and I believe that he can. I was talking a little bit about it in one of the game rewatch commentaries that his accuracy numbers, obviously he had some issues that he did need to work on. They've talked about that. A lot of it was with his footwork, his steps and things like that. But, when you rewatch the games, you see his completion percentage was not only low because we were taking a lot of deep shots, which is something that everybody always references. We definitely were, but also he had a very low sack number, not only just because he can get out of trouble and, get out of there with his legs, but he was also very smart of knowing when to throw the ball away. And if you're throwing the ball away a lot, that's going to bring down your completion percentage as well. And he was very smart with doing that. He's not a quarterback that gives up a ton of sacks or didn't make a lot of mistakes in general last year, really. And I think we'll see him do, that to an even greater extent, because one thing that we've seen is quarterbacks in their second year starting at WVU usually take a big jump, and he had an impressive year last year. So if he takes a big jump, definitely he could be someone that's a candidate for that award at the end of the season. And if he gets that accuracy up to 62%, like Kenny's talking about, it's going to be a big year. It's going to be a big year. Silas says Kansas and Iowa State are options for Coal Rush. Read that somewhere. That's kind of what I figured when they put that on there, but then they don't really have any reason why they're on there. I think that that's got to be what it is, Silas. So I believe that as well. I think that that's why they have those listed there. Personally, I would not be mad to see it be the Kansas game. Kansas is, really highly regarded coming into the season. And also just because the last time they were in Morgantown, what they did to us, I would love to see us break out the Coal Rush, get a rowdy crowd, and break those things out against Kansas and help it, motivate us to a big victory there that we're going to need in that game. In Kenny's opinion, Preston, J-Rob, Traylon Ray, and Hudson on the field at the same time. Hey, that'd be nice to see. That's the thing, though. Last year when we went 4 wide receivers, a lot of times Cole Taylor was one of those wide receivers. I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field, but I think all 4 of those guys are going to get a ton of playing time. And, much like at the cornerback position, we got a good problem to have at the receiver position as well, because we got, at least 6 guys that are going to be battling for those 3 spots. And, really you factor in those freshmen, Dom Collins, Day Farmer, they can get on the field as well. So it's a good problem to have, for sure. Eric says he thinks we loaded up on tight ends. That was for a reason. 100%, man. That position is going to continue to be a factor, not only this year, again, with Cole Taylor, who had one of the best seasons that West Virginia's tight end has had in 40 or 50 years, but in the future as well, because we brought in Greg Genross, who, same size as Cole Taylor at 6'7", was the number 1 junior college tight end in the country. As far as recruiting is concerned. And I think, he might not get on the field a ton this year because he's going to be behind Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis, who are going to be the 2 main tight ends that you see. But I think that he could fill that Cole Taylor role in the future. And when I was talking about the position battle at tight end, Eric, Will Dixon is a guy that is extremely fast. He's the fastest among those tight ends. So he's a guy that can make some plays in the pass catching game as well. And we'll still have Traylon Davis back another year after this one. So you'll still get to have him as one of the starting tight ends, kind of the more blocking of the 2. It's just a matter of who's going to take on that next pass catching role. Greg Genross or Will Dixon, maybe even Jackson Marco. And let's not forget Noah Braham as well, the son of Rich Braham. I think that he's going to factor in this year when West Virginia goes into those heavy sets, kind of like Luke Hamilton did last year as kind of the fullback type role. I think Noah Braham will take on that role this year. Timmy with a good point here, though. I was talking about Kansas maybe being the Coal Rush game, but this is a good point, Silas. In 2018 when we went into Iowa State and got upset there and they absolutely dominated us in that game, they were one of the only teams that really slowed down that 2018 offense. It was a blackout game for them. So, we do owe them one, Timmy. We do, man. That's a good point. We do owe Iowa State one. So either one of those is a good pick, really. You can't go wrong either way. Selfishly, I kind of like the Kansas one because the game's sooner and I want to see those black uniforms as soon as possible. But I think we owe both Kansas and Iowa State one. Kansas for coming in here a couple of years ago and getting a win on our home field and us not being able to hardly stop their offense. So we definitely owe them one. And then Iowa State, you mentioned they hit us with the blackout, so we owe them a blackout back as well. So either one's a good choice for sure. It's tough to call. Oh, yeah, good point, Silas. I watched that one as well. You guys check out Craig Edits, who does a great job with WVU hype videos and stuff. That young man has a bright future. He's going to hopefully continue doing that, and who knows where he's going to find himself someday. But I even commented on that video because I was so hyped up by it. I think I said, is it August 31st already? Because I'm ready for it, man. They had me ready to run through a wall. Yeah, check out Craig Edits' hype video, you guys, if you haven't watched it yet. Big Dan T said he's no Marshall fan, but we must trust in green and white. Absolutely, man. That's about the only time I'll cheer for green and white is when they're in our backfield. But yeah, that's definitely two of my favorite players on this roster for sure. And they're both going to be, huge game changers. I think either one of those guys could end up being Big 12 Player of the Year at the end of the year. If we have the type of season that I believe we can, both those guys are going to be candidates for that. I think Jaheim White is probably the most underrated running back in the country. I think he's got a chance to be the best running back in the country. I'm that high on him. I love Jaheim White. He's going to be, may not be on the watch list preseason, but he's got a chance to be a finalist for the Doak Walker Award at the end of the year, given to the best running back in the country, I think. Kenny says, plus on defense, the Northwestern transfers. Yeah, Kenny, for sure. Talked about them a little bit when I was talking about the position battles at corner and the position battle at safety. Both those guys are going to get a ton of snaps. Both could even be starters. I think Garnett Hollis definitely will. We'll see how Jaheim Joseph progresses there at the safety spot, currently behind Anthony Wilson, but we'll see if he can overtake him. Both those guys are going to be good players in this defense, and Northwestern had a talented defense. Tim says that he thinks Hudson Clement will have a breakout season this year. That's a good pick for a breakout player, Tim, for sure. He really came on last year, got injured a little bit about the midpoint of the season, so kind of hindered him in the back half of the year. But from all accounts, he's really stood out today in the open practice, and he's got a chance to be wide receiver one maybe. As I said, that wide receiver position is going to be an interesting battle to see how those reps end up being split, but he's got as good a chance as anyone, a huddy-tuddy there, man. I think he's going to have a big year. So appreciate all your guys' comments. I'm going to share this hype video real quick, then I'll come back to close this thing out. If you guys got any final thoughts, throw them in there. I'll touch on them one more time. But before I do, let's share this awesome hype video that WVU football or WVU's media account released today on social media. This is good stuff.
Nighttime in Morgantown, West Virginia, on the campus of West Virginia University.
That's the sideline first down and more. Ball taken out by West Virginia, back the other way. No doubt. How about that turnaround?
Got 40.
Caught touchdown. West Virginia wins.
Lobs it in the air.
Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old zone, but it is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
And the only state, greatest state in the nation, was covered in blue, and that was West Virginia, and that's why we won this game.
Woohoo! Penn State ain't ready. Penn State ain't ready. We're about to unleash on them August 31st, guys. Oh, man, that's got me ready. That's got me ready for the season. And less than a month away now, guys. Fall camp's underway. We've talked about a ton of position battles here in the stream. We're going to get to see how they play out over the next couple of weeks. But, man, we've got a loaded squad heading into this year. Just judging by the position battles we've talked about, both on offense and defense, ton of depth, definitely the most depth this staff has had since they've been here. So super excited for this year, guys. Super excited. The Bill Stewart speech will make me want to run through a wall even when I'm 90. 100%, Silas. Couldn't agree more, man. That speech gets it done every time. That'll always get you hyped for sure. So definitely been a fun stream, guys. Can't thank you all enough. Big Dan T, Tim, Silas, Kenny, Eric, everybody that popped in here in the chat, man. Really appreciate you guys. Can't thank you all enough. Be sure to check out the pre-recorded videos I released today, both on the main channel. I released a roster update and also talked about jersey number updates as well in that video. Check that one out if you haven't already. And, of course, if you're a channel member, you've got multiple game rewatch commentaries to go back through if you're at the Almost Heaven level. And then all channel members can check out the presser points video I put out today where I broke down Neil Brown's press conference from yesterday. I'm going to try and do that throughout the season for most of his press conferences there. So ton of extra bonus content there for channel members. But with football season now kicking off here, fall camp kicking off, the content's going to be coming hot and heavy here, even on the main channel. So can't thank you guys enough for supporting me however you choose to do so. Really, on this journey to hopefully eventually do this full time one day, and you guys are the catalyst for that to be able to happen eventually. But if you can't support me monetarily, one of the best ways you can support me that's free is by just clicking the thumbs up button here in the video. Give this video a like, whether you're watching now or live, or you're watching this after the fact on a playback. That still helps with the YouTube algorithm. And of course, just subscribe to the channel. That's free to do, and you'll get a ton of West Virginia football content coming into your feed here from the Country Roads webcast. And I always appreciate you guys, no matter what, here on the Country Roads webcast. You guys are the best fans in the country. Of course, Mountaineer Nation, no one's a better fan base than what we have here at WVU. And we're going to have a lot to cheer about in 2024 as we get into what's going to be a very special season, I feel like, guys. So appreciate you guys tuning into this one. Hopefully we shedded some light on the position battles and got a chance to answer some of your all's questions as well. Maybe here in a couple of weeks when we do another live stream, we'll have some answers to some of these position battles, and we'll see how we did as far as our predictions went for how the position battles will shake out. But a lot of news upcoming with fall camp underway. Can't wait to talk about it and chat with you guys again in the near future. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountain.